Good evening, campers, dreamers, and babysitters. When his girlfriend Phoebe is swamped with college exams, Tom O'Bannon, a rowdy pro wrestler, struggles to make ends meet, agrees to fill in as a last minute replacement for her well paying babysitting job. Tom arrives at an isolated family home where he meets the precious 10-year-old Grace. What starts off as a quiet night of pizza, video games, then quickly spirals into bloody, violent chaos as Tom and Grace find themselves fighting for their lives when an otherworldly cult of masked intruders descends on the home. Yes, folks, this is our raw reaction review for Here for Blood. All right, well, it is time. Yes, SCREAMBOX has graced us with another SCREAMBOX original, this time Here for Blood, which, I mean, just by that opening, you should know that this film is definitely right up our alleys. Definitely seems to be a little bit of a special cut there for Luke, considering, I wouldn't say there's very many horror films. You'd probably know better than I would that really center around at least the idea of a pro wrestler being our central character. Can you confirm nor deny that?
I can confirm that there is maybe just a handful more, if that. There isn't something where we dive too deep into pro wrestling, even though there is a pretty good marriage between pro wrestling and horror.
Absolutely. We talk about it all the time on here that it seems like those communities like to cross over. And yeah, this is definitely one of those films that understood that. Definitely one of those things that you could tell in the development of it. They understood that, yes, these communities, they're tied together. And yeah, I think that this is definitely another interesting pick for Screambox. This is a very independent project. This is something that I know was shot for. I don't necessarily have the budget here, but it wasn't a ton of money. And they shot it up in Canada. Actually, started shooting this, I believe they said, back in the pandemic. So this was back in 2020. It started hitting festivals in 2022 and has now found its home on Screambox. So, Luke, tell me, what do you think of Here for Blood?
When you hear pro wrestling in here, I think, you already get a particular connotation of, we're going to turn the volume up as high as it can go and we're going to get really wild with it. Now, that's honestly what I was expecting. When you read the little synopsis at the beginning, I think that is something where, and I haven't had this feeling necessarily in a bit from the movies we've seen, where it's like this would be nestled into the 80s perfectly. That concept of this pro wrestler babysitting in a satanic cult. That is something that is 100% 80s feeling. It's something that, I think the vibe is there, especially with the picture that we're using in the background here. It's something that, screamed that kind of 80s vibrant, wild kind of concept. And that's what I was going into Here for Blood for. And I'll say, I think the film does get there. For me, I think it takes a little bit longer than I had initially anticipated. Because, I think this is a film where you can spend 10-15 minutes world building and then get into that wacky premise of our main character Tom O'Bannon wielding an axe and going after satanic cult members. So I will say, overall, I think I enjoyed my time with Here for Blood. I just wish, it takes a little bit longer to get in the concept that I was hoping for.
Yeah, I think that's very fair. I also got very big 80s vibes from this, especially, we had interviewed Alex from Screambox back a few months ago, and he had dropped this as one of the upcoming titles that we were going to be seeing soon. And just the idea of that pro wrestling meets horror, we were excited for it. So seeing the actual poster and the trailer and everything and getting more of an idea of what this was going to be about, I was excited. I definitely thought that this was going to be nestled a little closer to like that Onyx, the fortuitous stuff. And I think that it doesn't really get to that point as far as just like when it comes to the comedy or anything, but this definitely finds a voice of its own. And it is one of those things that I think really lives and dies by its cast. I think that they are easily, upon reflection here, the strongest part of this film for me. I think that, although the concept is cool, You could tell that there's budgetary limitations, so they couldn't go as deep into the lore as I think that some people are going to be hoping for or wanting out of this. But I think that you really make up for it with a lot of the chemistry here, especially between our main three, with Sean Roberts being Tom O'Bannon. I mean, seriously, the guy just eats up scenery in this. I think that he is charming, funny, and also can kick some ass. I really loved his portrayal in here. I know that you and I were throwing around very big, not saying that he's living up to this, but very big Roddy Piper vibes in the sense of like, they live and stuff. But then also, I think that the girl who plays Grace, I think Maya Masajevic. I can't say your last name. I apologize, Maya, but she was also really great in my opinion. I thought that she had a really great chemistry with Sean Roberts, and I thought that they really sold this whole thing for me. I think that it's one of those films that you got to really make sure that relationship works when it's between somebody who's like a big hulking wrestler and a child, and those are your two main leads. You got to make sure that works, and I think that they nailed that.
Yeah, and there is pretty heavy ensemble cast here, but I will say Sean Roberts really does steal the show here. I think for me, he's the shining light in terms of performances, where I can say, hey, you look at the film, Sean Roberts got amazing traps, and he puts those to use when he puts, the film on his back here and really hoists it up, I think. Because, for me, his line deliveries, I'll be honest, sometimes that the comedy doesn't necessarily work for me when we're into the written comedy for our characters to actually, deliver. I think the wackiness of the premise is something that I would have probably leaned a little more into rather than kind of just doing the comedic deliveries. But I think when Sean Roberts as Tom O'Bannon does the comedic deliveries, I think his timing's perfect. He has this kind of dry humor, I think, that really does work, especially when he's acting opposite toward our 10-year-old Grace, with that kind of seriousness that he has to his voice. I think it really does work well. As we get more so into the ensemble cast, I'll say, as we get Phoebe in there integrated, I'll say the dynamic for me gets a little lost in between Tom and Grace. I would have loved this almost odd mashup team up of this hulking pro wrestler with this 10-year-old, a little more of that dynamic. But I will say, in terms of comedy, I think Sean Roberts knows the tone. He knows how to deliver these things, and he does it perfectly in between that comedy, that action. I think he does it really well.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's a lot of things to love when you get into the action and the comedy here, but especially if you're a gore hound, you're going to appreciate a lot of this here because the team behind this, they really committed to staying pretty much, I would say 99% practical in here. There is very few visual effects when it comes to the gore, and I mean, it's just further proof that you can do it. Now, if I got to put this on a scale, is it as like gruesome, I guess, as like Terrifier? No, I'd say Terrifier definitely gets a little bit more detailed, a little bit more disturbing, as opposed to this just being very fun. This is very fun gore. This is very much just like we're cutting people's appendages off and we're just getting big gushes and squirts out of every orifice. And I loved it. I thought it was fun. I appreciate the fact that they stuck to their guns and really committed to practical. And that goes across the board here. I think that there's a lot of wonderful practical effects in here. And it does make up for some, obviously very budgetary restricted, visual effects that you'll see very minorly throughout. But I gotta say the practical stuff, and then there's a you see it in the trailer. There's a head in this, a little decapitated head. It's one of those things that's like it also just looks top notch. I love everything they did with it.
Yeah, and gore wise here, I'll be as I'm making my notes and I'm watching this. I'll be honest. I honestly, as we went through, I'll say every kill was such a plus for me because they did not shy away from the gore. They really took their time. They knew what horror fans wanted to see, and I say they make all those kills actually count. I don't think you're left unsatisfied. There's some gore at the hands, I guess, of the detached
Oh
head,
yeah.
which I think is a lot of fun. And the detached head itself is just, a great concept. James Roberts is the screenwriter here, just really had a great vision and great concepts that he did inject into this film. Well, I said, at the beginning, it does take a minute to get going. And I will say, as this film does finally get going, I think, is this about an hour 40, something like that?
It is about an hour 40.
I'll say, I did time it out around the 47-ish minute mark is really where I get into what I had wanted out of this film. And once we hit that moment, it's nonstop. It's really where I feel like they do press the gas full-fledged and we do get going. And this is like absolutely what I wanted. So, if any critique, I would say, shave down that beginning time a little bit and really get us into the instances that we want. Because once we get there, they make them absolutely count with the gore, the wacky concepts. Sean Roberts' performance as Tom O'Bannon, I think, really works well. There's a lot of pluses here. They really do take you on that thrill ride, and they earn every minute of it as we get toward the end.
Yeah, I agree. I think that definitely it didn't bother me as much, I would say, the runtime on this one. I think that I found myself pretty invested. I will say the opening feels a bit inconsequential and feels a bit weak as far as like getting into the story. It felt kind of unnecessary. It's one of those things where like if I had to think of spots to cut, I would cut that. But it is just kind of setting things up, I guess. But for me, I think the biggest fall in this entire like project, as far as just like what I was hoping for, is when we really get down to the cult leader and like just a lot of the cultists themselves. There's a couple of standouts. There's particularly one cultist who just goes through the ringer. I think when we did our interview with James Roberts, he described him as the wily coyote of the group, and I mean he is entertaining just to see all this shit happen to him. And then there's kind of one main one who I think is pretty cool, and it does have a little bit of character to him. Other than that, though, the rest of them, they're pretty just bodies. They're just body count, and especially the leader feels very underproduced, underwritten in some places, and just I think very much inconsequential to a little bit of the story. And I wasn't happy with that per se, and I think that it definitely leaves you kind of looking for more of a definitive force, a definitive evil to kind of bring the trio together to go against. But I think that it does leave enough on the table as far as what this cult was trying to do, that if they were to continue this story, if they were to do a sequel and they wanted to kind of keep going with it, you could easily salvage it. You could easily fix it, make it more entertaining, more interesting. But I think, when you have something like this where it is a small production and, you have only a limited amount of money when it comes to your effects and your kind of characters and your story, I think they spent it the right way for horror fans. But yeah, I do have to admit that I was a little bit let down by the antagonists.
Yeah, and I'll say as we work toward the end there, and again, this kind of intertwines with my critique at the very beginning. Like if we would have, shaved down the beginnings and got to where we wanted to be, and then by the end of it, as the film stands, I think it almost feels like we're a little bit rushing to kind of put a bow on this and end it. Whereas if we would have shortened up the very beginning and lengthened up the back half and kind of really got this big final battle that we're all looking for, especially when we get to kind of our big bad satanic cult leader. I think it would have been a little more satisfying from that aspect. But they present so many great ideas in terms of other worlds, other realms, things like that, where it's like we're kind of eager to see what's on that other side. But with budgetary restrictions, I'm sure we couldn't really get there. But they pose so many great potential aspects of the film here that I think, as we sit with this and the credits roll, you're eager to see some sort of sequel here, because James Roberts did pose so much potential in terms of this lore and what we could be doing down the road. And Tom O'Bannon, I think, is a very strong kind of protagonist here to kind of lead the charge in a sense, and to spend more time with them. You wouldn't have to put me in a headlock, so to speak, to get me in my seat for a sequel for this. So, I think there is a lot of great stuff, a lot of great lore that's presented here. Some strong characters in the Sean Roberts, Tom O'Bannon character. And I'd be eager to see a sequel, because I think there's a lot more mileage you can get out of Here for Blood. Hey, if Screambox is interested in, having some sort of franchise attached to the actual streaming service, I think you found a winner here in Here for Blood.
I agree. I think that you could do a lot of fun stuff with this. I think that definitely continuing the adventures of Tom O'Bannon would be something I'd be here to see. And yeah, I think overall, I got to give Here for Blood a recommend. I think that this is fun. Like I said, there it does leave me wanting a little bit more in the villain department, and maybe shave that runtime off a little bit. But yeah, all in all, I think that this is still very fun. It's a nice bounce back for Screambox after us not really being big fans of Underground. But I think that this is very much in line with kind of what we've grown to expect from them and what we're hoping they continue with. And I really hope that you guys check this one out and support it, because, like I said, I really like the characters here. And I would like to see more of this. I would like to see them continue this story.
This one's certainly a winner. I will go recommend it as well. I think there's a lot of great gore. Tom O'Bannon's such a strong character, a lot of great lore presented, and this is a film that gets you eager to see a sequel. Even though I think that front half, it takes a little long to get going. The back half is a little short, and the big bad, in a sense, is a little underwhelming. I think overall, there's a lot of great stuff here, a lot of fun to be had. And it's just a fun world to be in. So, like Dylan says, if you're not subscribed to Screenbox, what are you
What
doing?
are you
Because
doing?
Here for Blood is something that I think a horror fan's going to want to see, because it does present a lot of fun stuff. So definitely a strong recommend for me.
Absolutely. But alrighty, guys, yeah, that's going to wrap us up here for our review of Here for Blood. Let us know what you guys think. And yes, obviously, check this thing out on Screambox. It will be available for you to watch on February 9th. It's going to be on the app there as usual. And yeah, I think that this is definitely, again, it's a big win. As far as Screambox goes, for just a really fun, laid back, you can just throw this on and have a good time kind of horror film. And yeah, I think that that's kind of what we need, trying to fight off that winter blues for some of us up here in the northern states that are just getting hammered with the cold. Not so much the snow, but the cold has been fucking terrible. But I'm
Relentless.
glad that I have all this blood to keep me warm. So yeah, that's my attempt at some humor there. But anyway, guys, definitely check this thing out, and let us know what you thought down below. And yeah, I guess that's going to wrap us up here. So until next time, I am Dylan Newell.
And I'm Luke Janesco.
And remember, stay scared.